Sometimes love doesn't rush in. It unfolds quietly in the spaces between moments. And when she whispered, "Every second feels like it was leading here," I knew everything had changed. The moment I first saw her, the world seemed to soften around the edges. It was a quiet afternoon in a small cafe tucked away from the city's usual rush, where the light filtered through tall windows and gentle streams, painting everything gold and warm. She sat alone at a corner table, a book resting forgotten beside her cup of coffee. There was something about her that made the air feel different, like the space between us suddenly held more weight. She was striking, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that drew it quietly, effortlessly. Her hair was streaked with subtle hints of silver, catching the light as she tucked it behind her ear. Her eyes, deep, calm, and steady, held stories that I could only begin to imagine. There was a confidence in the way she carried herself, a grace born from experience and calm acceptance. Yet beneath that, I sensed a softness, a quiet vulnerability that only revealed itself in small, unguarded moments. A fleeting sigh, a pause before she smiled. Our eyes met briefly across the room. For a second, time seemed to still. It wasn't a glance filled with the usual nervous flutter or forced intrigue. No, it was something more grounded, an unspoken acknowledgement, like two old souls recognizing a shared path. I remember how my breath caught, subtle but unmistakable, as if some invisible thread had tugged me closer. She didn't look away, and neither did I. The cafe buzzed softly around us, the clink of cups, murmured conversations, the faint aroma of fresh coffee beans mingling with the subtle sweetness of baked pastries. But in that moment, everything else faded into a gentle hum. Her hand rested lightly on the table, fingers curled just so, and I noticed the delicate way she brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. There was a rhythm to her movements, slow, intentional, that made me want to reach out to close the distance without words. It was the kind of meeting that felt both ordinary and profound. No grand gestures, no sudden sparks or fireworks. Just two people quietly sharing a space that seemed to hold a promise they hadn't yet named. A subtle tension hummed beneath the surface, like the calm before a gentle storm. I found myself wondering who she was, what stories lay behind her serene gaze. Was she waiting for something, or someone? Or perhaps, like me, she was simply lost in the quiet hope that this moment might lead somewhere unexpected. There was an honesty in the way she looked at me, neither questioning nor judging, just a simple openness that invited trust. It made me feel seen, not just on the surface, but deeper. And in that silent exchange, a tiny seed was planted, one that whispered of possibilities, of a connection unfolding slowly with care. As I left the cafe that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that every step I took had been leading me here, to this chance meeting, this moment suspended in time. And somewhere deep inside, I knew it was only the beginning. After that first quiet encounter, fate, or perhaps just a gentle twist of circumstance, brought us together again. This time, not in a cafe filled with the comforting clatter of cups and casual chatter, but in a sun-dappled park where the world seemed to slow down even further. The trees stretched their branches overhead, filtering sunlight into golden pools that shimmered on the worn wooden bench where we found ourselves sitting side by side. It was strange how natural it felt, sitting so close to someone I barely knew yet somehow already trusted. We spoke little at first, letting the silence wrap around us like a soft blanket. Words felt unnecessary between us, as if our shared presence said everything that needed to be said. The spaces between our sentences were filled with an ease I hadn't experienced in a long time, a quiet rhythm where hesitation and curiosity danced gently together. Her hand brushed my knee, not intentionally, I think, but with a tender accidentality that sent a warm pulse through me. It was a light touch, barely there, but it lingered in my mind long after. I caught a glimpse of her eyes, glimmering with something shy yet confident, and in that glance, I felt the delicate weaving of trust beginning to take shape. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but sure, like a melody that invited you to listen closely. We talked about small things, the kind of everyday details that most people would find mundane but suddenly seemed rich with meaning. The scent of the grass after a recent rain, the way the sunlight caught a spider's web like strands of glass, the favorite books that had left a mark on each of us. These little exchanges built a bridge between us, one made of shared moments rather than grand declarations. I noticed how she leaned in slightly when I spoke, her shoulders relaxing in a way that made her seem even more approachable. There was no rush in her movements, no pressure for more than what we were giving each other in that quiet afternoon. Our age difference was never mentioned. It wasn't topic because it didn't need to be. Instead, it showed subtly in the way she held herself with quiet wisdom, while I brought a kind of youthful eagerness tempered by careful observation. Our worlds felt different yet complementary. The gentle breeze stirred the loose strands of her hair, and she tucked them behind her ear again, the same delicate gesture I had noticed before. The sun warmed her skin where it peeked from beneath the sleeve of her light jacket, and I imagined how that warmth must feel against her in moments less sheltered. When our hands brushed again, this time more deliberately, it was like a silent promise, a quiet invitation to keep exploring whatever this was between us. For the first time, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this slow unfolding could become something more. That the gentle closeness we shared could grow into a bond built on respect, understanding, and the unspoken language of touch and presence. In that park, with the world humming softly around us, I realized that connection isn't always loud. Sometimes it lives in the smallest, simplest moments, the brush of a hand, a shared smile, the comfortable silence that says, "I'm here with you." And for the first time, I wanted to be exactly where I was. Even as our connection grew, the quiet joy we shared was shadowed by the silent weight of doubt, both in the world around us and in the quieter corners of our own hearts. It wasn't just the age difference, though, that hovered between us like an unspoken question. It was the invisible barriers built from years of experience, expectation, and the cautious fear of what others might think. I caught myself watching her sometimes, wondering what she really saw when she looked at me. Was I just a passing moment, a friend, or something she quietly wished could become more, even if the thought scared her? And her eyes, sometimes they flickered with hesitation, a gentle withdrawal that betrayed the struggle beneath her composed surface. We shared more moments, walks through city streets, evenings spent quietly talking, but the tension was there, subtle but persistent. It lingered in the way she hesitated before touching my hand, the way her smile sometimes faltered when I looked too deeply into her eyes. There was a fear in both of us, fear of rejection, fear of stepping into a world that might not understand or accept what we were beginning to feel. The world outside was quick to judge, even if no words were spoken aloud. I imagined the whispers behind closed doors, the sideways glances, the assumptions people might make about us. And yet, despite all that, there was a hope quietly burning beneath the surface. A hope that what we shared was real enough to overcome those doubts, that the connection between us was stronger than fear. She once told me, almost in a whisper, about moments in her past when she had guarded her heart carefully, afraid to let anyone in. I listened closely as she spoke, her voice trembling with the weight of old wounds and new vulnerabilities. It made me realize how much courage it took for her to even be here with me, to let down her walls one fragile brick at a time. The hesitation wasn't just hers. I felt it too. I wrestled with my own insecurities. Was I enough? Was I ready to be the kind of person she needed? Sometimes I wondered if I was foolish for hoping for something more. But then, there were moments, fleeting but powerful, when everything felt possible. A brush of her fingers along my arm, a lingering look that held more than just friendship, a quiet smile that seemed to say, "I'm here if you want me." In those moments, the barriers softened, if only briefly. The invisible walls built by years of experience, by societal expectations and self-doubt, began to crumble just enough to let the warmth of possibility seep through. We were both caught in that delicate space between hesitation and hope, knowing that what we wanted was there, waiting, but unsure if we were brave enough to reach for it. And yet, even in the uncertainty, the pull between us grew stronger. It was a silent promise, an unspoken question hanging in the air. Could we let go of fear and simply be together, however slowly, however imperfectly? The answer wasn't clear yet, but in the quiet moments when our hands brushed or our eyes held just a little longer, it felt like the beginning of something worth risking everything for. That evening came gently, like the closing of a chapter and the tentative opening of another. We had met again, this time in the quiet solitude of her living room, a space filled with soft shadows and the warm glow of a single lamp. The air between us was thick with things unsaid, with feelings too fragile to voice, but too urgent to ignore. We talked, really talked, about fears we rarely shared with anyone else, about the ghosts of past mistakes, and the longing for something more than just passing moments. Her voice was steady, but carried a tremor that spoke of vulnerability. And I realized that beneath her poised exterior, she was just as uncertain, just as afraid of what might happen next as I was. After a long pause, when the words had fallen away and silence settled like a gentle companion, she moved closer. It was slow, deliberate, as if she was measuring every step against the weight of what it might mean. Her hand reached out, trembling just slightly, and brushed a stray lock of hair back from my forehead. The touch was electric and tender all at once. Soft fingers against my skin, warm and sure, sending a ripple through me that I hadn't expected. It wasn't a grand gesture or a sudden rush. It was quiet and intimate, a silent communication that said more than words ever could. The roughness of her palm contrasted with the smoothness of my skin, grounding me in the moment. I could feel the faint tremble of her hand as it lingered just a moment longer, as if seeking permission without needing to ask. Her eyes met mine, steady, open, full of something like hope and trust. For the first time, the barrier between us felt as if it might be breaking, slowly but surely. My breath caught in my throat. I exhaled slowly, releasing a tension I hadn't fully realized I'd been holding. The world around us, the muted colors of the room, the quiet ticking of a clock, faded away, leaving only the warmth of her touch and the steady beat of our hearts. She didn't pull away immediately. Instead, her hand stayed there, lightly resting, a gentle anchor in the space between us. I reached up, my fingers grazing her wrist with the softest touch, a silent reply that spoke of shared vulnerability and unspoken desire. It was a moment suspended in time, delicate, careful, yet charged with the promise of something deeper. It was the first step across the invisible line we'd both been hesitant to cross, a quiet confession spoken through the language of touch. In that small gesture, everything shifted. The hesitation that had kept us apart began to melt away, replaced by a tentative courage. We both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be doubts, fears, and moments of uncertainty. But in that instant, it felt possible. Possible to be close, to be seen, to be accepted. As her fingers finally slipped from my forehead, the silence between us was no longer heavy with unspoken questions. Instead, it hummed softly with the quiet certainty that this was only the beginning. And for the first time, I felt the warmth of a new kind of hope, one born from a touch, a look, a moment shared in perfect stillness. The afternoon stretched out before us, like a gentle promise, as we wandered slowly through the garden, where sunlight danced through the branches and painted dappled patterns on the gravel path. There was no hurry, no pressing need to fill the spaces between us with words. Instead, we moved in a comfortable rhythm, side by side, letting the quiet intimacy of shared presence speak volumes. She walked close enough that I could feel the faint warmth radiating from her arm just inches away from mine. Every so often, our fingers brushed lightly, a touch so soft it could have been mistaken for the breeze stirring the leaves. But to me, it was electric, a silent conversation of yearning and restraint desire, and patience. The garden was alive with the scent of blooming flowers, their perfume delicate yet unmistakable. The scent wrapped around us like a tender whisper, mingling with the subtle warmth of her skin near mine. I could see how the sunlight caught the slight shimmer of her hair, the way it framed her face with a quiet elegance that seemed both natural and intentional. We paused at a weathered wooden bench beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak. The air was cooler here, but the closeness between us created its own warmth, a bubble of calm in the midst of the world's noise. She settled beside me, her body shifting slightly until our knees nearly touched. The faint brush of her hand against mine sent a quiet thrill rippling through me. Neither of us spoke at first. Instead, we let the silence stretch, filled with the unspoken emotions that hovered just beneath the surface. It was a silence that wasn't empty, but full of questions, hopes, and the fragile beginnings of trust. Her eyes found mine, steady and calm, and in that gaze I saw a mirror of my own feelings, a mix of hesitation and hope, of longing balanced with careful patience. She gave me a small, almost shy smile, the kind that felt like a secret shared between us alone. I wanted to reach for her hand, to close the distance and make the moment less fragile. But I held back, aware that some things need time to grow, that true closeness isn't rushed, but nurtured with care. Instead, I let my fingers twitch, barely grazing the edge of hers, waiting to see if she would meet me halfway. And she did. Her hand moved just a fraction closer, fingertips grazing mine like a gentle brush of wings. That simple, tentative touch spoke more than any words could. It was a promise of presence, a quiet declaration that we were both willing to be here, together, even if the path forward wasn't yet clear. Around us, the garden seemed to hold its breath, as if nature itself was witnessing the slow unfolding of something rare and beautiful. The rustle of leaves, the distant chirping of birds, it all felt like the soundtrack to a moment suspended in time. In those moments between words, the distance that had once felt so vast between us began to shrink. The age gap, the doubts, the fears, they faded into the background, replaced by a shared warmth that neither of us had expected but both deeply welcomed. As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over everything, I realized that this was the kind of closeness that didn't need to be spoken aloud. It lived in the soft touches, the lingering glances, and the quiet understanding that we were slowly, surely building something that might last. And in that gentle unfolding, I found a peace I hadn't known I was searching for. The night wrapped around us like a soft, dark velvet curtain, the stars scattered across the sky like distant whispers of light. We found ourselves alone on the rooftop terrace, away from the hum of the city and the expectations that often weighed heavily on us both. The cool air carried a quiet stillness, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. She stood close beside me, the warmth of her body a gentle contrast to the night's chill. Our shoulders brushed lightly, a touch so subtle it might have been missed if I hadn't been paying attention. But I felt it deeply, an electric connection that ran beneath the surface of everything we'd shared so far. For a long moment, we simply looked up at the stars, the silence between us thick with meaning. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she spoke, her words fragile but filled with a quiet certainty. "Every second feels like it was leading here," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. Those words hung in the air, delicate and profound. It was as if she was confessing a truth she had carried silently, a truth that made everything else suddenly clearer. The weight of the moment settled over me, and I realized how deeply I had been waiting to hear them. Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining with a tentative gentleness that spoke of trust and vulnerability. The roughness of her skin against mine grounded me, reminding me that this was real, that we were standing on the edge of something meaningful and new. My voice caught as I responded, the words slow and sincere. I felt it too, like all the moments before this were quietly leading us to this exact point. It was a confession born from the depths of my heart, a truth I hadn't dared say aloud until now. The fear of what might come next still lingered, but it was overshadowed by the warmth blossoming between us. She squeezed my hand, a small but powerful gesture that said more than words ever could. In that squeeze, I felt her hope, her courage, and the fragile strength it took to open herself so completely. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if celebrating our shared vulnerability. The cool breeze carried the scent of night jasmine, sweet and intoxicating, wrapping around us like a secret blessing. Her cheek brushed against my arm, a fleeting contact that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a moment of pure intimacy, soft, tender, and full of promise. We stayed like that for a while, hands still clasped, hearts quietly aligning in the gentle rhythm of the night. There was no need to rush, no need for grand declarations or dramatic gestures. The simple act of being together, fully present and unguarded, was enough. In that space between the stars and the city lights, we found something rare, a connection that transcended time, age, and fear. It was the tipping point where hesitation gave way to hope, and hope blossomed into something beautifully real. And as the night deepened, so did the certainty that this was only the beginning of our story. The night was cool but inviting, the kind that wraps around you like a soft, familiar blanket. We walked slowly side by side, the quiet rhythm of our footsteps blending with the distant hum of the city. The world felt softer somehow, less sharp, less demanding, like it was holding space just for us. Her hand found mine, naturally, without hesitation or the nervousness of before. Our fingers intertwined with a comfortable ease that spoke volumes, of trust built slowly, brick by brick, and affection nurtured in silence and shared moments. It was the kind of touch that didn't need words, a quiet promise that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. She rested her head lightly on my shoulder, the delicate weight a comfort that settled deep in my chest. I could feel the steady beat of her heart, slow and steady, syncing with my own. It was an intimacy born not from passion, but from presence, a gentle closeness that felt like home. As we walked, the night wrapped us in a calm embrace. The cool air kissed our skin, mingling with the warmth radiating from where our hands stayed locked. The faint scent of her hair, the soft, subtle fragrance she always wore, drifted around me, a reminder of all the quiet moments we had shared. In her silence, I found more than comfort. I found a profound understanding. No grand declarations were needed here. The slow burn of our connection had blossomed into something real, something that didn't demand loud proclamations or dramatic gestures. It was steady, patient, and true. We talked softly about the future, not in sweeping plans or promises, but in gentle hopes. She spoke of small dreams, the kind that felt achievable when you had someone by your side. I shared my own quiet wishes, and in those exchanges, the walls between us crumbled completely. It was a love forged in the pauses between words, in the lingering glances, and in the touches that spoke volumes without saying a thing. We had moved past doubt and hesitation, past the judgments of others and the fears we carried inside. What remained was a simple, honest connection, one that felt unbreakable. When we finally reached her door, neither of us wanted the night to end. She looked up at me, eyes shining with a mixture of relief and joy. I brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, my fingers lingering on her cheek longer than necessary. The softness of her skin beneath my touch was a quiet testament to the journey we had taken. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For what?" I asked gently. "For trusting me. For being here." I smiled, pulling her hand once more into mine. Every second was leading us here. She leaned into me again, and in that moment, everything felt perfectly right. The world outside faded, and all that mattered was the warmth we shared, the promise of a future we would build together, one slow, beautiful step at a time. And so, under the gentle glow of the streetlight, we stood there, two souls intertwined, finally home.